Hello guys, it's Jabari here. Africa does not particularly have the best reputation from a global perspective. Most of the continent consists of poverty-stricken nations, disease epidemics, and civil wars. Other parts of the continent consist of primitive tribes who live off the land. Even the most successful nations in Africa are really only comparable to the least successful nations in Europe. People tend to assume that these are all attributes that have perpetually plagued the continent since the dawn of time. So this begs the question, is Africa really a perpetual dark continent? Have Africans really accomplished nothing more than loincloths and mud huts in the past? Fortunately, the answer to this question is no. The lingering effects of colonialism, slavery, racism, and unnatural borders have negatively impacted the continent and its people since the 1800s, and time is the only remedy to these problems. However, life in Africa prior to European influence thrived, and had some surprising achievements that you probably would not expect. Number 5. The C-section. The Caesarian Section, or C-section, is a practice that involves the intentional removal of a fetus directly from the uterus of a woman who is unwilling or incapable of a vaginal birth. Most of you probably assume that this is a product of recent times, and only possible with the advent of modern medicine, with roughly 1/3 of all live births in the US being carried out by way of C-section, according to the National Center of Disease Control. Others may assume that it was invented by the Romans, and only recently rediscovered by Europeans during the modern era. After all, it does take its name from the Roman ruler Julius Caesar. However, all of these assumptions are incorrect. In fact, there is no evidence that Julius Caesar was even born this way. While C-sections have been documented since Roman times, they were generally done as a last-ditch effort to rescue a fetus from a dead or dying mother without any plans or procedures in place to repair the wound afterwards or save the mother's life. Emperor Jilin, the first ruler of the medieval Chinese kingdom of Chu, was also recorded to have been born by being cut from his mother's body. Surprisingly enough, the people of Uganda have apparently been conducting proper C-sections as we know them today since ancient times. In fact, they were the first people apart from modern Western doctors to be credibly recorded performing successful C-sections. A British doctor and explorer by the name of Robert William Falcon observed this practice with his own eyes in the year 1879. According to the US Library of Medicine, he recorded all of it in his journal, Notes on Labor in Central Africa. In this journal, he noted that banana wine was given to the mother as an anesthesia, while also serving as an antiseptic to sanitize the bodies of the doctors prior to the operation. They would then make a midline incision in the abdomen, cauterizing the wound as the surgery progressed, to reduce blood loss. After the fetus was removed, the wound was sealed shut with iron needles and an herbal paste was administered to promote healing. Neighboring states such as the Kingdom of Rwanda were also recorded to have similar practices. Despite the fact that this was recorded nearly a century after the first successful Western C-section, he concluded that it had been around for quite some time due to how well developed and widespread the procedures were. Number 4. Female soldiers. Women around the world have experienced a very turbulent history prior to the 20th century. As women in the Western world have gained progressively more rights and equality, military combat remains one of the few predominantly male-only institutions. Women in the United States have only been allowed to join the military with a combat-emphasized MOS, or Military Occupation Specialty, as recently as the year 2016. In West Africa, the case was quite different. The Kingdom of Dahomey, located in what is now the country of Benin, hosted an all-female corps of soldiers. Originally created by King Hawuk Baja as a corps of elephant hunters, they are referred to as the Gbeto. Later, preceding King Agaja would convert them into an all-female royal bodyguard unit armed with muskets. In the year 1727, they were utilized in the conquest of the Kingdom of Waida, and over time gained great reverence by the people of the Dahomey Kingdom, who called them Nominton, or our mothers in their native Fon language. The French frequently compared them to the Amazons of Greek legend, but sometimes they're referred to as Black Sparta. This is due in part to the fact that many of them were hand-picked from a very young age by the king himself and subjected to rigorous training, while others were prisoners or volunteers. From storming acacia thorn defenses, to gaining indifference to pain, suffering, or death, and even vowing to never marry and remain virgins for their entire lives. These were the highlights of being a Dahomey Amazon who dedicated their entire lives to being warriors. years. Number 3. Smallpox inoculation. Smallpox is a disease that is virtually eradicated in most of the world's developed nations, and only still exists in the fringes of third world countries. Like the C-section, most of you probably assume that only modern advances in medicine made it possible to grant immunity to the disease. Early instances of smallpox inoculation have been documented in ancient China and India. West Africans not only practice smallpox inoculation independently, but are also the ones credited with teaching it to the West. According to an article published by Harvard University, a preacher by the name of Cotton Mather had an African-born slave whom he called Wenzemis. Wenzemis belonged to an ethnic group known as the Akan. At the time, these were the same people who controlled the wealthy Ashanti Kingdom in what is now modern-day Ghana. In 1716, he told Cotton Mather about a procedure that was conducted on him and all of the children of his village, in which a small amount of fluid from the diseased skin of an infected individual was applied within a small cut of an uninfected individual. He also claimed that the effects of the disease were significantly less severe when contracted through the skin rather than the air, and that immunity would be granted after the recovery. Just 6 years later, a smallpox outbreak ravaged the city of Boston. Cotton Mather urged local doctors to inoculate their patients, utilizing the method taught to him by Wenzemis. Upon learning that it was taught to him by his slave, most people shied away from it. In the aftermath, over 14% of those who were non-inoculated succumbed to the disease, while nearly 98% of those who were inoculated survived. Cotton Mather later received the honors for this method and traveled to London in 1725, being elected to the Royal Society, despite the fact that it was taught to him by Wenzemis. Dr. William Cornwallis Harris and Dr. Pettit also observed the practice being conducted by the Tigray and Amhara people of Ethiopia during a French scientific mission in the year 1839. Number 2. Overseas trade. We all grew up learning of long-distance trade routes such as the Silk Road, in which articles such as silk, spices, and porcelain were introduced to Europe from China and India. Or technological innovations such as gunpowder, the compass, and paper spread throughout Eurasia. When you think of long-distance sea voyages, however, you'll likely think of the period after 1492, when the triangular trade or the Columbian exchange took place. When the Portuguese first began trading with the East African coast in the 16th century, they were surprised to find that the Swahili people were building their own ships and already knew how to use compasses. The ships that they sailed, which they called mtepe, were of a uniquely indigenous construction. According to an article labeled Perceptions of African Identity published by PBS, these African sailors began trading with Arabians, Indians, and Chinese as early as the year 500 AD. This is evidenced by Chinese porcelain being discovered in various coastal towns of East Africa and as far inland as Great Zimbabwe. One such example of just how well established this trade was is documented in an instance in 1414 when a ship was dispatched from Malindi bound for China, housing a gift for the court of the Ming Dynasty. It wasn't just a gift of gold or ivory either, it was a full-grown giraffe. So impressed with the animal, the Chinese emperor would display the animal during imperial functions as a show of his magnificence and his ability to tame such a seemingly mythical beast. A painting of the giraffe was commissioned by Xing Du, which still exists to this day. This trade was so frequent and extensive that the Swahili language itself is a product of several East African, Arabian, and Hindi languages. Number 1. The Walls of Benin. When you think of walls, moats, or ramparts, structures such as medieval English castles and the Great Wall of China likely flood your mind. Africans are usually not even considered in regards to walled cities or any monumental structures at all. However, nothing can be farther from the truth. There are several structures throughout the continent that directly contradict these notions, including the Great Zimbabwe, the Kano Walls, and the churches of Lalibela built by the Shona, Hausa, and Ethiopians respectively. One structure, however, stands above all of these structures. In fact, it's larger than all other medieval structures, including the Great Wall of China. With its construction beginning around the 9th century and ending around the 15th century, the walls of Benin were a series of moats and ramparts that crisscrossed the cities, towns, and royal palaces of the Benin Kingdom, which existed in what is now modern-day Nigeria. In an article published by the New Scientist by Fred Pierce in the year 1999, he described the walls of Benin as being 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China and having consumed 100 times more material than the Great Pyramid of Cheops. The walls of Benin were even featured in the 1974 edition of Guinness Book of World Records, where it was labeled as the largest earthworks carried out prior to the mechanical era. In addition to being bombarded by the British in the year 1897, these extensive walls continue to be ravaged by modern urban development in Nigeria. The few sections of it that still do remain are collectively labeled as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. In addition to being hidden, erased, or outright denied, most of Africa's achievements have simply vanished due to the fact that most of the continent simply lacked any written language. I feel like that is ultimately the biggest contributing factor towards Africa's seemingly lackluster history in comparison to the rest of the world. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed the video and let me know if you've learned anything new or if there are any other achievements of sub-Saharan Africa that I could have included in this video. Also guys, I ask if you can please support my goal of doing these videos full time by donating to my GoFundMe account or becoming one of my patrons. If you pledge at least $10, your video idea will automatically be next on the list of what I upload. Links can be found in the description. The more support I receive, the more time I can spend creating these videos and increase the quality of my content. Thanks again for watching guys, and always remember, we don't come from nothing.